Hey, soul survivors, we're going to talk about the difference between overt and covert narcissism, how to spot the difference and why it matters. So, overt narcissism, this is known as the grandiose narcissist. They are confident, attention seeking. Overt, I think of over the top, they're easier to spot. Covert, I think of like covered, it's more hidden and harder to detect. So, overt, over the top, they openly seek admiration and praise, and they often dominate conversations in order to highlight their achievements. They can be loud and assertive. Overt narcissists are typically extroverted and openly display their sense of superiority. They have an entitlement and arrogance about them. They come across obviously self-centered, boastful, and often dismissive of other people. Covert, the vulnerable, they are more subtle and introverted. Covert narcissists are more reserved, but they still crave that admiration, and it's often through passive or indirect means. And we have to remember that the narcissist can go between covert and overt depending on the person, depending on the circumstance. Now, the covert, they have that victim mentality. They tend to present themselves as misunderstood, undervalued, or victims of unfairness compared to other people. Insecurity, they have the sensitivity about them. So unlike the overt narcissist, they are highly sensitive to criticism, and they can withdraw or sulk rather than lash out openly. So you'll see it present more where the overt kind of doesn't care. They brush it off like whatever, or they lash out. But the covert, they tend to sulk or do passive aggressive things. The overt, they have that inflated self-view. They genuinely believe in their superiority and have an unshakable sense of self-worth. A lack of awareness. They often lack the insight into their behavior and don't see themselves as flawed. Covert, though, they have that fragile self-esteem. So they do have a sense of entitlement, but their self-esteem is more easily threatened. They mask their inferiority feelings. They can have insecurities and hide behind a facade of humility, competence, or self-deprecation. So in order to deal with a lack of self-esteem, they'll kind of embrace that, like I'm just a loser, and try to get pity that way. Interpersonal style, overt, they dominate the relationships, often take center stage, and they demand that admiration. They'll dismiss the needs or feelings of others. They are conflict oriented. They can openly challenge or attack anyone who questions their superiority. They love exploitiveness. They will openly use others for personal gain. They don't have guilt or remorse as long as they get what they want. And the covert, they have a passive aggressive behavior, and they may manipulate others subtly using guilt, silent treatment, or even backhanded compliments. They have emotional withdrawal. They might avoid direct confrontation, but they engage in that sulking or indirect retaliation. And they have a dependency. They start to form relationships where they can rely on others to validate their worth without overtly demanding attention. It's very subtle. Now, the reactions to criticism, when you're dealing with the overt, the grandiose narcissist, they can become defensive and aggressive. They respond to criticism with anger, denial, or attacks on the critic. They can have public outbursts. They are more likely to lash out openly to defend their ego. So they'll either brush it off like, what are you talking about? Or they will go on the attack. The covert, they have that internalized hurt. Covert, they often internalize criticism. They'll feel deep shame or inadequacy, and that can result in passive aggressive retaliation or withdrawal. Subtle revenge. Instead of using direct confrontation, they might seek revenge through indirect or manipulative means. They can go behind your back. It's like a backstabber. And when we're talking about their emotional expression, the overt, they have a lack of vulnerability. They will rarely show emotional vulnerability and may dismiss others' emotions as weaknesses. So when you're trying to discuss things with them, this is how I feel, and they'll see that as a weakness and they'll go on attack. They'll use it against you. It's their power shift when you show vulnerability. And in a healthy relationship, you should be able to be vulnerable and you guys work out a compromise. So also they have excessive positivity or anger. They can project confidence, but can become explosively angry when their superiority is challenged. The covert, they're a little bit more fragile. They appear more sensitive or introspective, but they will use this as a tool to gain sympathy or validation. Subdued emotional outbursts, rather than openly expressing anger, they can sulk or use that passive aggressiveness. So as far as their manipulation, the overt, power and dominance, their manipulation is often aimed at maintaining control, dominance, admiration. They'll exploit others openly and unapologetically. Covert, their manipulation often seeks reassurance and sympathy rather than using that overt dominance. They can make other people feel guilty for not recognizing their supposed sacrifices or suffering. And they do have a different public versus private persona. So when they're in that overt stage, consistent self-promotion, their grandiosity and entitlement are evident in both public and private settings. It's just who they are. Transparent behavior. They rarely try to hide their narcissistic traits because they see them as strengths. The covert, though, two-faced, they can appear humble or unassuming in public, but express entitlement and resentment privately. They have subtle sabotage in private. They can undermine others in ways that are hard to detect. So if you're feeling like, why couldn't I see these red flags? You have to remember, narcissists will even fool trained psychologists. They are liars. And if you don't have all the facts, it's hard to know what the truth is. You have to go off of assumptions or gut feelings. So the key phrases or behaviors that are commonly seen, if you have an overt, they might say things like, you should be grateful to have me in your life. I'm the best at what I do. Nobody else compares. And also, people are just jealous of my success. But the covert, they're more apt to say, no one appreciates everything I've done for them. I'm always the one who has to suffer. I could have been successful if people didn't hold me back. They just don't take accountability for where their life has gone. So to spot the differences as far as energy level, overt narcissists are more extroverted and domineering, but the covert are more introverted, passive aggressive. They have a conflict style where overt, openly confrontational, covert, they're using indirect means like guilt or manipulation. Emotional expression, the overt, they have that confidence, arrogance, but the covert, they have that vulnerability or humility. So why is it important that we know what the difference is? If somebody's toxic to you, they're toxic to you. If they're not willing to work on things, it's always going to be toxic. But it helps to recognize when manipulation is happening and to set boundaries, avoid becoming enmeshed in unhealthy relationships, and tailor your responses to their distinct behaviors and tendencies. So I'd like to hear some of the things that your narcissist has said to you. If you feel that they were covert or overt, or did they go flip-flop in between the two? I'm here to help you through the difficult times. Healing is possible. One-on-ones are available. Topic requests are welcome. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.